It's that time again. It's time for yet another video where I roll the random button on Crunchyroll, watch said anime, review it, and then get sick. On the last episode of Crunchyroll for Poco's Udon World, we rolled Lostorage Incited WIXOSS. I'm pronouncing it that way on purpose. A card battle anime from JC Staff, one of the most storied anime studios in Japanese history, dating back to the 80s. This anime follows our main character Homura Suzuko, a high schooler who becomes a selector. As a selector, their goal is to collect 5 coins in a certain time period. If they fail and lose all of their coins, then they cease to exist and then fade away and classify itself as obsolete. If they simply decide not to participate in the selector battles, their coins will fade away and they'll lose their most important memories. But Homura's childhood friend, Morikawa Chinatsu, also becomes a selector, and when they meet, Chinatsu reveals herself to not be the little girl she used to be. Will Yuri Undertones save Homura and Chinatsu's relationship? Who is the holder of the Millennium Eye? Well, Yugi boy, this is Lostorage Incited WIXOSS. So first off, this anime has a lot to like, which is surprising considering its sub 7 rating on my anime list. Well, much like many anime on Mal, the rating simply just does not represent the quality of the show. Don't get me wrong, there are issues, we will get into those in this video, but there is just a lot to enjoy more than there is to criticize. For example, I think the two main characters, Suzuko and Chinatsu, are interesting and easily likable. Suzuko is this endearing person who has this sugar-coated, bubbly personality, you know the kind. While I've even seen this character quite a bit in other anime, I think her character really ends up fitting in this particular story. And for what it's worth, I mean, it's an easy character to get behind. What I also like about her, though, is that while she is unsure and kind of has that meek personality, she doesn't let that be her dominating personality trait. She actually does a lot of acting out and thinking for herself. This is evident in her battles where we see a different side of Suzuko where she gives it her all to get those coins and then later on save Chinatsu. Suzuko isn't female character of the year, but to give credit where credit is due, she's very solidly written. Then you have Chinatsu Morikawa, our lost childhood friend of Suzuko, who adds a lot to Suzuko's character, but as well, she's got a little bit of a character of her own. Chinatsu, rather amusingly called Chi-chan by Suzuko quite a bit, was at one point just like Suzuko, a good-natured little girl with a sugar-coated personality. But after Chinatsu moved away, she became a little more evil. She became a selector, and ever since she's just been doing selector battles, winning and losing, working for a guy that gets selectors to sign these really bad contracts. This is something I loved about Chinatsu. They play up really well how she's simply just a lost person. To put more specifically, I think she's a little bit heartbroken over being separated from Suzuko at a young age. And that's kind of where there's a bunch of Yuri undertones. There's tons and tons of it between Chinatsu and Suzuko, which, hey, if you're into Yuri like I am, boy, you're gonna love this. You're gonna love it. But let's just talk about that awful main antagonist for the series named Ko. Oh man, I simply hated Ko because he's like every generic token bad guy who does and says generic token bad guy things. He serves no real purpose in this show other than to be something Suzuko and Chinatsu to take down. And none of his motivations are actually even well developed. And I'm not sure if that's because, you know, there's 2 anime before this that are, but they're different stories, because you can actually watch this series as its own standalone thing without watching the prequels. But he makes people sign contracts, and that's kind of it. But the thing is, we never really see anything come from these contracts at all. Chinatsu just gets them to sign them come hell or high water, and that's kind of it for that plot thread. I feel like they were onto something with Ko here, but he's just not very good. It honestly feels like somebody actually thought this character would work perfectly for this series, but I think if Ko was a little bit more resourceful and meddling, then I think this character could actually work really well. But he just sits around and says cringy shit, and that's a perfect segue into my next topic. The villains are so ridiculous and over the top, but at the same time, the writing for this show makes them have this shoehorned in shades of gray to them. But here's the thing, it doesn't really work. And don't get me wrong, I appreciate the effort here, and I do appreciate the thought of trying to make something like this work, but they do it in such a questionable way that's more often than not ham-fisted rather than subtle like ideally most people think it should be. Everyone who isn't the protagonist essentially is this good guy until they're evil dicks who just want to take people's coins. It's like 0 to 100 in an instant with no build up at all. And because of that, there is no consistency with the antagonists. They also make them have the worst, cringiest dialogue you'll ever hear. Their dialogue is absolutely filled with sexual innuendo, and sadly, it's just cringy and clunky. Even Chi-chan, who honestly is the best they kind of do this with in the series, she even suffers with this, with kind of how she says cringy lines like, "You want to do it with me? Am I not good enough?" It's like, no. Stop saying that. I know you're a bad guy, but just you're cringy. And honestly, that's not the worst of ideas if the show didn't feature one of their main selectors as a little girl. But the dialogue is bad in most every way for the antagonists in this series. This is kind of just an icing on the cake, if I'm to be real. It's consistently bad even before they add this stuff into it. All right, it is time once again for that point in the video where we select the next anime we'll be covering. So let's hit the random button on the Crunchyroll and see what we get. All right, it seems we've landed on a certain magical index. So I'm gonna be watching a certain magical index. This is a show that I've actually kind of started to want to get into. So yeah, pretty exciting. So like, if you guys want to see me cover a certain magical index early, you can right now. In fact, by the time you're seeing this video, if you're watching on YouTube, this review is already up on my Patreon page. And all you gotta do is go to that Patreon for $1 and you get full access to everything. So, get back to the video. However, the protagonists, and I'm going to pronounce it Elrigs, are pretty much all cool, outside of Koz and a couple others who are just kind of forgettable. I am often drawn towards Aya, who is the Elrig of one of those generic good guys, seems to have some sort of sister complex after her sister became a selector and died. It's very sad in that sense, and she actually ends up being the best thing about the two. Aya is like a magical girl Elrig who acts all cute and says, "Oni-chan," a lot, you know the type. But when she gets pissed, she drops the saccharine voice and goes full angry Japanese woman. It's actually really amusing. Plus, she has the most unique presentation in this series too, out of anyone. And that goes for the main characters, I believe. Or just these really cool animated moments. But there is a battle which happens between those two and my second favorite selector, Rio and her Elrig Mama. These two are essentially a mother and daughter combo team, and I like them for their natural chemistry and charisma. And when Mama and Aya eventually do a battle, it leads to a rather humorous dialogue exchange. I'll leave that up to you guys to figure out, or unless you're probably seeing it on the screen. It doesn't matter. I also like the idea of this little girl and Rio becoming a selector and her Elrig literally being the personality of a mother. Like an overprotective, doting mother. It's just super unique and weird that it just kind of works for an anime like this. I would actually, wouldn't mind these two being the main characters. Or at least getting their own spin-off. I think that'd be pretty cool. While they're not as great as just Aya, I think the two's relationship and chemistry really help carry the two quite a bit. They're always entertaining when they're on the screen. But then there is Suzuko and Lil, who I think are pretty solid from a combination speaking. Maybe not the most interesting, because both Suzuko and Lil are kind of the standard stoic hero characters, Lil in particular being the most like this. But I think they're one of my favorites because they're just very consistent moment to moment. You know what to expect. They aren't dumb and make dumb decisions. And yeah, some of their dialogue and motivations aren't exactly the most original or even well done. But like I said, the consistency is commendable, and they beat it into your brain. It's just that consistent. But I also think their character designs are both spectacular for this series. In particular, Lil, who I'd absolutely buy a poster or a figure of because, I mean, she just looks so cool, and especially when she goes into like her battle mode, she has like these beautiful wings and like this crazy weird underboob thing. I don't know what that's going on with there, but I'm not gonna say no. You know what? No, it's the braid. It's the braid that completes her character. Yeah. It isn't the underboob, it's the braid. Which, speaking of character designs, that brings me to character designs, as it's one of the more surprising aspects, especially coming from JC staff, because the animation and art are just so solid. While not the most visually impressive, it's actually somehow still better than One Punch Man Season 2's animation and art, done by the same studio, which I know you're probably looking at this and saying, how did they do that to One Punch Man? What happened? But besides that, there are actually just some random shots in this series that just look amazing. Episode 1 in particular is the best looking episode because with that episode, they use a lot of cool and unique shots. And in general, the animation is fun and interesting thanks to the setting, and the idea of card battles help to elevate the action, which is one of the most interesting aspects of this anime, as it's an anime based off a game, and in this case, a card game. A children's card game. The series uses its battles fairly well to show really solid action. I was often more than not highly entertained when any fight happened in this series. The only times I felt it harmed the series was probably the first couple of episodes, which really was just there to establish the rules of the game and the stakes for the selectors, so it wasn't really much about the battle itself, it was just about explaining how the mechanics work. Then we have another surprising aspect, and that's the score, which was composed by Maiko Iuchi, who's most known for her work with JC staff on series like the Railgun series, which I will be covering on the next episode of this series. Don't be fooled, I was often highly impressed by the score in this, and felt there was a lot of depth to it. And I think why I like this anime so much probably just has to do with how well the score is produced. For example, the score really seems to nail its tone with more dramatic scenes. Scenes with Shinatsu in particular always seem to have some of the best scoring because it feels more subtle and was able to go a little bit more into these subtle emotions and help lift up a lot of the scenes involving some kind of character drama or important story beat. The same could be said for the selector battles, but not nearly as impactful, but that's because it feels like there was an intentional formula they wanted to apply to it. Essentially, it felt like they wanted the battles to be noticed immediately with similar to repeating motifs. But overall, I think the score is a highlight and does a lot to help the series' more emotional aspects come to the top rather than meander at the middle or even the bottom. Overall, I think Lostorage Incited WIXOSS is wait for it, just a little bit more. Okay, I can tell you now. It's actually good, guys. Surprise. While it isn't perfect by any means, and it's flawed heavily, it's actually a very competent anime that has a good set of protagonists, an interesting concept, and tries to be more than just a card battle anime, which I think it is. I don't really think this anime is a card battle anime, which I think is why this anime is so good. It's nothing like a Yu-Gi-Oh! Where it's just about having card battles with the children's card game. It tries to be on a much deeper level than that. And even though it fails with important aspects like the shades of gray characters, and it's just sometimes it's just not really well executed, they still try to do it in the first place. And they try to do it good, which is commendable. And to be honest with you guys and gals, the series to me has more passes than it does failures, which is usually the mark of a good show by my standards. So, do I recommend Lostorage Incited WIXOSS? Well, yes, kinda. On one condition, and that condition is that you actually enjoy card battle anime. If you do, then sure. I mean, and it's got like, tons of mega Yuri undertones. Come on, y'all. That's good. It's also got cool, battles. The designs are pretty awesome for just about everyone. I mean, what's not to love? Check it out. It's available on Crunchyroll and Verve. Subbed. If you didn't know, this is a Patreon-supported series. Like I mentioned in the middle of the video, you can get early access by a month. Just by simply going there and subscribing on the $1 tier and above, you get access to literally everything. Plus, there's just a tons of free stuff on there anyway, so if you want to pop in there, look around, there's tons of stuff you just can't get on any of my public channels. I strongly consider it just for that. And if you decide to support me there, I would greatly appreciate that. As well. Make sure to give this video a like if you haven't already. Comment down below if you enjoyed Lostorage Incited WIXOSS and what your thoughts are about the series. And as well, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell and do that Patreon thing. I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you guys for watching this video, and can't wait to get to the next one. Bye-bye.